Hey, I'm Boone Christensen, and this is 5 Minutes of Therapy. Today is going to be a continuation of the last video, which talked about detecting the effects of trauma. Today we're going to talk about how to process trauma. And as a quick review, we know we have trauma if we have memories that evoke unpleasant emotions. Things like anger, shame, guilt, fear. These are traumatic memories. Or if in our day-to-day lives we're having experiences where we feel too angry, too anxious, or frozen, then we can tell that we have something in the past that is informing the present. We may not know what it is yet, but it is in there if our emotions are disproportional to the situation. Our brains can unlearn the danger just as much as they learned it in the first place, if we allow them to. And we can let them if our present situations are actually different than our past. For example, if we're trying to process the trauma of a physically abusive childhood, we need to make sure we're not in a physically abusive relationship. And as we're processing, it is best if we are able to stay present, not dissociate from the emotion, meaning separating the story from the feelings you had, and hopefully not entering a state of panic. If our traumas have risks of entering these kind of states, please seek professional help with them. But most traumas to be processed can actually be done with just a safe, validating person or on our own, perhaps with a journal. It just requires that we feel the emotions of those experiences. And the model that I'm going to show you guys today comes from somatic experiencing, as presented by Peter Levine in the book Waking the Tiger. You can look it up if you'd like. But this is the kind of the visual that I'll be using today. So this model has us think about trauma as like energy or stress inside the body. And all animals have a trauma resolution mechanism that will happen naturally if it is allowed to. For example, if there's a deer in the woods that starts getting chased by a mountain lion, it will enter its fight or flight, and if it escapes, it'll have to shake it off. It'll have to get over the shock, and let that stress out of its body, and then it'll return back to its stress baseline where it was before the traumatic event happened. So that deer won't develop PTSD. And the same things happens with humans. If we have something that sends us into fight or flight, like a car crash or something, if we are allowed to feel sad and shaken up about it and feel the emotions, that stress will eventually leave our body as well. But what happens with humans is that they like to distract themselves, and they invalidate each other and themselves, and they victim blame, and they don't allow each other to have emotions, natural emotions of fight or flight and freeze. And so what happens is this process is not allowed to happen, and that stress stays inside the body and starts to build up. And so if somebody experiences multiple small traumatic events, then they will eventually develop symptoms from all that stress that is still inside their bodies. So like multiple small traumatic events can have the same effect as one large event. Something that would give somebody PTSD. And so what does this look like for us? When something happens to us that sends us into fight or flight, makes us angry or afraid, we will enter fight or flight, and we have to go back out the way we came. We must feel that same emotion on the way back to a calm, logical state. And if we don't, that stress is going to stay in there, and it's going to cause us problems later on. So there are a couple other things that can interrupt the processing, which we'll talk about another day. It's things like rumination, things like panic attacks, and the things that maybe the person that we're talking to might do that could shut us down, that can keep the natural healing process from happening. But hopefully that explains in in brief terms how we get trauma out of our bodies and how we start resolving the underlying issues, the underlying causes of symptoms. So please leave comments. I'll leave a couple links to some related articles, and we'll continue this discussion in more detail in other videos. Thanks.